righty. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Mike K. Young, and I've got some really good friends here with me today. I say friends, I grew up with them probably my whole life, David and Ashley Hawford, and their story today, I think, is going to be a huge blessing and a help to you. I know it has been for me. I was able to be a part of it, which I feel like I was really young at that time. So it was like I remember bits and pieces, and I remember the prayer time. I remember the excitement time, but it's kind of like bits and pieces. So I'm really excited to hear just kind of the whole span of things. But when did you guys first go to Happy Valley? Like what year, by chance, if you happen to remember?
Goodness. Yeah, so she went before we got married.
My family started attending Happy Valley in 1999, the spring of 1999. It was just after your family came, I believe. Y'all might have been there a year maybe or something, but we started coming right after you guys. And then David and I did not get married until 2004. So he came on board a little bit after. But
yeah, and I was familiar with Happy Valley. I went to Grace, and, we would all have youth rallies together and stuff. So I'd been to Happy Valley many times. Plus, I grew up with Brother Todd. So I was familiar with people at Happy Valley, but I wasn't a member there, not until a year or so after we got married.
Right. So you finally got right with the Lord and came on board.
I got right with the Lord, listened to my wife.
But I was a good wife. I went with him when we got married because he was like, we're going to go to Grace. I said, okay, because I liked Grace. It was no big deal. Yeah. Follow your husband, followed him. Yeah. But then, let's go back.
I saw the light.
I love it. Well, the mustache looks great, by the way. I just figured out.
Well, I appreciate it. Its days are numbered. It's funny. Sunday, we're having like the public safety day. I'm bringing all my gear, my firefighting gear, and putting it on. And the kids have talked me into leaving it at least until after Sunday. But after Sunday, it's meeting its fate.
Well, people automatically, like you didn't even have to tell me you were a firefighter. I already knew automatically. Like he's a firefighter.
Yeah.
People didn't even have to ask. It was just there. But man, I love it. Thank you for your service too. And thanks for sharing that as well. Man, it's just a blessing. So we basically known each other because I was born in 99 and I didn't want to sing that to make you feel older either. But born in 99, y'all got married in 2004. So I would have been, 5 years old. That's when, all that started. How long after, and I'm going to let you kind of get into how you guys met and then kind of get into the story of everything that kind of took place. But how long after, I think 2004 you got married, how long after did everything else happen?
It was about 3 years.
3 years. Yeah. It was in 2007. We had been married just a little over 3 years when the rug was pulled out from us.
Yes.
Right. Okay. So I would have been 8 years old, and I still remember being 8 years old, everything, like not everything, but like hearing bits and pieces. So that's crazy. So if you could maybe dive into how you guys met and then just basically what God did, what all happened, if you wouldn't mind. I would just love to hear the story, and I know our listeners would as well. So
yeah,
you start
I'll
because
go back.
You have the story.
And this is a true story. She thinks I'm lying, but it's not. So we both went to Youth Christian School in Powder Springs Elementary School. My mom was a teacher there. I went there my whole school time. But anyhow, she was, I think, 2 grades ahead of me, but
older and wiser.
So I would get there early because my mom was there early. We'd go to the lunchroom and I'd just hang out with buddies. And I always remember Ashley would come in with this giant lunchbox. Like it was like a turquoise green and white giant lunchbox. And I had the biggest crush on her. And she would come in and like skirt around the edge and go to the other side of the lunchroom. And I remember my cousin went to school with us. He was like my brother. I remember one day he kind of like said something to her like, David's got a crush on you. But she would always set this big lunchbox up like in front of her face between her and I so that she couldn't see me and I couldn't see her. But that was my earliest memory probably. But I did. True story. I had a crush on her and I was probably in 3rd grade and you were probably in 5th grade or something.
Wow.
I don't remember that. Now you can blame it on chemo or radiation.
Says she doesn't, but she's got to remember.
But I don't remember any of that
big lunchbox.
Well, the crazy thing about it is every time I ask any husband and wife, like how you guys met, the stories are always different. Like it's because that's what happened with me and Hope. I tell the story, and then she's like, "Yeah, that didn't happen. So here's what happened." And then she goes into her details, and I'm like, I do not remember any of that. So whatever. But that tends to be what happens. So that's awesome. So that's how you guys. Go ahead. Well, sorry.
How we initially met. But then his cousin Caleb started coming to Happy Valley. And a couple of the guys that had graduated from youth in his class started coming. And so there was a large group of us that would hang out, girls and boys, and we'd just go out to eat or to a movie. We would go to the fair, just hang out. Yeah. And David started joining in on this group, even though he didn't go to Happy Valley. And I was like, oh, wait, I think I remember this guy. And I was the initial pursuer. And, you know, the rest is history.
Here we are.
I love it. I love it. But you don't like the mustache, though.
She hates the mustache.
Man,
the kids are my biggest and only fan of the mustache. So.
I don't like
it. Man, it's a divided house, basically.
Yeah.
Here's the problem, though, with it. When he shaves it, it like takes 10 years off of his face, and he looks like a baby. So then he looks like my older son. He doesn't even want my husband because he's got this he doesn't age.
Well, it's kind of a win-win for me because she hates it, but then I can grow it. If I'm feeling old about myself, I can shave it and I instantly gain 10 years.
He does. He will. I promise you, when he shaves that mustache, he's 10 years younger.
Yeah. I'll take it.
I love it. Well, it's not going to last longer. So a good thing we got a video of it. So this will stay up for you. Not Miss Ashley doesn't like it, but so that's awesome. You guys met. So 3 years after, you know, a lot of times people say when you get in marriage, it's a lot of getting to know each other. You're trying to get established. You're literally combining two separate lives together.
Yeah.
And so you're starting that, and then all the craziness kind of happened. Like, kind of bring us into that. Like, you know, you got married, and then just kind of how it just transitioned into all that. How you guys, just kind of the story of all that.
Well, we got married in 2004, and David was pursuing a job at the fire department at the time. And so he was actively pursuing that. I was still in college and graduated from undergraduate in 2005. And then I wanted to go to law school. I worked for an attorney, and I was like, I really like this, and I want to go to law school. So I was actively pursuing law school. And then, like you said, it's just all we're blending two lives: work, school, bills, a house. And it's hard anyway when you first get married, and you blend all the extra. So it was a little difficult. And then in the midst of me trying to get into law school, he got hired on with actually at first the city of Atlanta Fire Department. And while he was in recruit school with them, he got hired on with Cobb County, which is where his heart truly was. And so he took that job at Cobb County. And shortly after all that, we found out we were expecting. And we wanted kids. I mean, I think when we first got married, we were like, oh, let's have a slew of kids.
Yeah, that was the plan.
You say that until you start having them, right?
Right.
So we wanted a bunch of kids, but it was a little bit of a shock that it wasn't quite when we had planned for it. I had wanted to at least be in law school, maybe towards the end of law school. But anyway, looking back, hindsight's 2020, and you see how God orchestrated everything. And so in 2006 is when I found out I was expecting Harley, and he was due in January of 2007. Is that right?
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. 2008.
Yeah.
But shortly into actually, it wasn't even shortly into the pregnancy. Right before I found out I was expecting, I had this knot that had come up underneath my jawbone. I remember I was driving down the road with Angelia Dunlap, and she was pregnant with her first child, and we had went way out past Atlanta to some baby store that she wanted to go to. And I can remember being on 400. I'll never forget it. 400, stuck in traffic with her, and I had this knot. I felt it. I didn't think nothing about it really. I ended up going to a doctor. They said, oh, it's probably in a lymph node. You're probably about to get an infection. We'll put you on antibiotics. No big deal. So it was never thought of again. The next month is when I found out I was expecting Harley. So what's crazy though is then after I found out I was expecting, that knot came right back. And it did that for 8 months. It would come back and you would feel it. I could feel it right underneath my jawbone. I'd go to the doctor. They would put me on antibiotics and it would go away.
So crazy thing about this at that time, like at the same time that Ashley had that on her neck, my dad had basically the exact same symptom. Like I don't remember the same side or opposite side, but same location. And he went to the doctor and he had a blocked salivary gland. He had I guess you can develop stones in those glands, and it stopped it up and just caused it to enlarge itself. I mean, to the letter, the exact symptoms. So in my mind, you've got the same thing going on that Dad has, because she has a problem. My dad had the same problem. That's what his problem was. So this has to be the same thing, Yeah. So I didn't really give it a second thought. I was like, oh, you got a blocked salivary gland.
Well, and the doctor even agreed.
Yeah,
we went and saw an
ENT.
It was the same thing. So much so that they even sent me for an ultrasound because being pregnant, they don't like to do MRIs and CAT scans. Yeah. So they sent me for an ultrasound, and the radiologist felt the same way. His report read that he felt that I had stones in my salivary gland and that I just needed to be treated with antibiotics. And at the end of the pregnancy and upon delivery, they could go in and remove the stones. It was no big deal. So that was in July. And again, time just rocked on and the knot would come. It would wax and wane and it would come. The biggest it ever got would feel like about a golf ball. Yeah. And it was hard as a brick. You couldn't move it. But as soon as I started antibiotics, it would shrink back down. So in November, I remember going to my doctor and saying it got a little bit larger, painful. And I remember I had a bad feeling about it. So I went back to the ear, nose, and throat doctor I was seeing. I said, listen, something just doesn't feel right with this. It feels a little bigger. I'm worried about it. On my dad's side of the family, there's a long line of females with cancer. And so I told the doctor, I said, I'm just worried. And he said, oh, I don't think it's cancer at all. But if it would make you feel better, we'll do a biopsy. He said, because a biopsy would help us in determining what type of infection it is. And that way we can get you properly treated. Yeah. So the doctor went into it not even worried. And I had the biopsy and they called me that night. And the doctor said, listen, they've been looking at this all day. They really can't tell what it is. I don't have an answer tonight and I'll call you tomorrow. Yeah. I was like, well, I would have thought you would have seen cancer right away. So I went to bed not really worried that night.
I thought the same thing, if it had been bad news, they would have known right off the bat.
And so the next day they called that evening. My doctor called. It was probably around 6:00 in the evening. And he called and his first words he said, is David with you? And I knew right then. There was he didn't have to say anything else. And I said, he's not, but I mean, whatever you've got to tell me, I'm fine. Yeah. And he said that mass is malignant. He said, it's cancer.
Man, that's crazy. So hearing that news, was it just like this is how much time you have, or what was kind of the thoughts that was behind that when they shared that with you? You don't have a chance, or what was shared with you guys with that and getting that news?
Well, when he first said that, my initial response to him was, am I going to die? And he was like, oh, no, you're not going to die. And I said, will my baby die? And he said, no, don't even think that. He said, you're going to be fine. He said, the baby's going to be fine, and I'll call you in the morning. And he was just real nonchalant about it.
So we had no idea or even what to think as far as, is this bad or is it not that bad right now? And the way he talked was that, it's not. So we're kind of thinking probably, well, I guess as the days went on, once we started formulating plans, that it was just going to be a quick surgery that would remove it. they talked about getting clear margins around what they removed, the tumor and stuff, and that it was kind of good to go after that. So we were still a little bit on the, obviously a sucker punch phase, but thinking that it's probably still not that huge of a deal.
So was he downplaying it and he knew it was bad, or was it like he didn't really know at the time and it was just
he didn't know.
He had no idea.
Okay. Well, so how did everything transition from there as far as, because I know some of the story as far as, and I don't want to share too much of the details I know you guys are going to share, but like how did that cancer progress from this is what we thought it was to what it ended up being and everything like that?
Well, what's funny is he told me he'd call me the next morning. That was on a Tuesday.
Yeah.
And really, we woke up to the phone ringing by my OB.
It was her OB.
And she called, and you just have to know this lady. I always describe her. She's like 4'10", 4'11", 80 pounds, tiny lady.
Yeah.
And she talks 100 miles an hour.
Just feisty.
You got to hang on to every word she says.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was like 7 a.m. And I answered the phone, and she was like, "Hey, Ashley, it's Dr. S. When can you be at the hospital? We need to get you some steroid shots. I've got you set up for the induction, and you'll arrive on Friday." I was like,
what are you talking about?
Yeah.
And so, but when I got her to calm down, she was letting me know that they were bringing me in that Friday. Now, this was Wednesday morning. Mm-hmm. They were going to bring me in on Friday to start an induction process for me. Harley was 32 weeks gestation at that point. And I mean, I argued, it seemed like for an hour with her. I said, "I am not letting you take my baby. He's too young. He still needs more time." And I didn't win the fight.
Yeah. So we went, in a span of 24 hours to no idea that she has cancer to finding out she has cancer. And now we got to face that, but we still, Harley's not due until January, to all in that same span of 24 hours. Now they're talking about inducing her and him being born on that Friday. So, nothing was done.
Nothing was ready.
I'd put off putting together all the furniture for the nursery. The crib had to be assembled. We had a little rocking chair thing that needed to be assembled. There was
a lot of work.
There was so much that needed to be done, so it was a whirlwind for sure.
That's what I tell people. Imagine just standing on a street and it's sunny skies, the weather's beautiful, and all of a sudden a hurricane, and you're in the eye. I mean, you're just spinning.
With no warning.
No warning. There's just no warning. You're in the midst of that hurricane. It's just like, it's not just one thing.
Yeah. It wasn't just cancer. It was
everything.
Everything.
So sure enough, that Wednesday and Thursday were crazy. We were at doctor's offices signing consent forms for me to have surgery, consent forms for Harley, touring the NICU, going to try to find clothes that would fit in, finishing the nursery, which thankfully the church, jumped in. All of our friends came over. I mean, I've never seen so much furniture put together in a couple hours.
But even to add to the crazy whirlwind, like you said, we toured the NICU. They had prepared us because he was so early that he was probably going to have to spend basically the rest of his gestational time in the NICU. So being faced with that of having a baby, but not really even being able to
not bringing a baby home,
bring him home, all that stuff, that he would be in the NICU. So it was a lot.
So they were inducing him. Was it because of the cancer stuff, or was it because of another reason?
No.
Well, it was because of because I needed to have surgery.
Yeah.
They needed him out so that they could take this tumor out. So they said, "We've got to get him out."
But so you did go through the inducing of Harley and all that stuff, and then and then you went through the surgery and everything. How did all that lead out? Did they get all the surgery out, or how'd all that work out?
So we had Harley. That's the first. Yeah, we got to stop right there for a minute, because that's the first miracle. Harley, they told us, he would. I mean, we were prepped for him not to be breathing.
Yeah, they said he probably wouldn't be breathing on his own.
He would be blue. We wouldn't get to hold him. I would deliver, and he would be whisked away, everything. And they kept saying, "This is normal. This is normal." Okay. So when he was born, there was no room. There was no room to move in that room. There were so many doctors in there, respiratory therapists, nurses, just a whole entourage of people in there. So he's born, the nurse, the doctor, they're all looking at him, and all of a sudden they just fling him up on me.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa.
And he was crying.
Yeah, he was crying. Yeah. He wasn't blue or purple or pink. And I'll never forget, and there's a picture of it too. When they laid him on me, his little arm just fell and it just landed right at my little shoulder. And his little bitty hand, he was 4 pounds. He was just tiny, just tiny, this little bitty baby. And he never went to the NICU one time.
Yeah.
Wow.
Not even for observation. Now, the NICU doctor was, I don't know, a man probably in his early 70s, if I had to have guessed, maybe late 60s. He came to our room to check on us and check on Harley. And he said, I've never in my entire career seen a baby born that early that did not at least come for observation. Yeah. He said, but most all have to stay.
Wow.
He said, I've never seen it. And so that was our first miracle, first that miracle. Harley got to just come home with us, and he was healthy. Mm-hmm. He faced issues later on, but it was just amazing. Yeah, his story. And now even, he's 17. In these 17 years I've had him, I've had so many friends have babies, or friends of friends, acquaintances, different things. They'll have babies at 36 or 37 weeks, and they go to the NICU, and I'm like, man, my baby was way earlier than that. Yeah. It's a miracle. You can appreciate it more.
Yeah.
The more you hear other people's stories. But anyway, Harley was born on a Saturday. He ended up being born Saturday morning. We came home on Monday. It was Thanksgiving week. On Wednesday, I had my surgery. Yeah. So I had to leave him at the house, and that was hard. Yeah. Very hard. We went to Kennestone Hospital to have my tumor removed. And I remember my doctor saying, this would be a couple of hours. And it was real early in the morning. The surgery was scheduled for real early. And I remember him saying, it'll just be a couple of hours. We'll go in, we'll remove it. We'll get you in a room. They were going to keep me overnight, and it'll be good. So I remember going into the OR, and I can remember coming out, and even in that groggy, sedated state of waking up from surgery, being wheeled down that hall. And I remember turning my head and looking out the window, and it was dark. Mm-hmm. And I thought.
And I remember the doctor said initially that it was probably going to be maybe a 3 or 4 hour surgery. But it ended up being, I can't remember, 6, 7, 8 hours, something crazy. And, we had the surgery waiting room packed, family and everybody from the church basically was up there, and we had the room packed. I think they even made us move across the hall to an overflow just to fill it up. But that was a stressful wait, just knowing like we are 3 hours past what he said it would be. So we were all kind of at a loss as to what was even going on during that time.
Man.
But once I got to my room and had woke up really good. The next day was Thanksgiving. Mm-hmm. My doctor came to check on me that morning, and he said, well, let me tell you what happened when we got in there. And so this mass that was what we saw the size of a golf ball was actually the size of a softball up in my neck. And it had grown fingers and wrapped itself around my jawbone and had grown into the muscle. Mm. So he said what was so extensive was they cut out some of my muscle. They had to scrape the bone. They had to sever a facial nerve. And then they removed everything on the right side of my neck. Mm. And I remember after he tells me all this, he said, now smile for me. And I thought, what? Why are you asking me to smile? Yeah. And I smiled, and he smiled, and he said, I can't believe it. He said, the nerve that we had to cut in order to get all the cancer is the nerve that controls your ability to smile on that side of your mouth. Mm. He said, so I was thinking you would not be able to lift that corner of your mouth anymore. He said, but you just did.
But again, going back to like the severity of the cancer, we were still in a place where we thought we were kind of over the hurdle now, because he had said, I got good margins all around the tumor. They tested everything, that they had clean margins all around. So he was extremely positive that they got every bit of that tumor, every bit of that cancer, and that it had not spread anywhere else. So I think, in our minds going forward from there was basically surgery, maybe some kind of light treatment, but that was it. Bad stuff's out. Now we can kind of get on with our life that we had planned.
Well, I remember asking him that Thanksgiving Day when he came to see me. I said, will I have to have chemo? And he said, oh, I don't think so.
Yeah.
He said, I think we got it all. Yeah. He said, that's why we were so aggressive in removing your muscles, scraping your bone, cutting nerves. So we were just so aggressive when we got clean margins.
Yeah.
And so, I was excited. In my mind, I'm like, okay, we're done.
Yeah, that's it.
We are done.
Man, that's crazy. So you did the surgery and then you just went back to your normal life and then something happened or like.
Yeah, basically we did. We went back home, and then they had started, because he had said whenever they pulled it out that they couldn't figure out what type of cancer it was. So the next few weeks were spent with them trying to figure out what type it was to see whether or not there would be any more treatment or anything else they needed to do. During this time, they were sending slides of this tumor all over the place, to Mayo Clinic, to Dana-Farber up in Boston,
Brigham Women's,
Emory, all the big hospitals that you think, great research.
Yeah, MD Anderson.
And they could not figure out, what it was. They all came back and said, all we can tell is that it's cancer. We have no idea what type it is, that she may be the only person who ever has or ever will have this type of cancer, that there was just no type or class that they could put it in.
Well, my doctor was convinced it was a lymphoma. Just the way it was acting, she was like, it's got to be a lymphoma. And she would constantly send it back out and it would always come back. It was not a lymphoma.
Yeah.
And then at one point, I don't know what pathologist said, I think it might be an angiosarcoma, which is a bone cancer. And they were going to go in and remove my cheekbone and every bone in my face down. And so they said, you need to go to Dana-Farber in Boston. You need to fly up there. So me and David and my dad and his dad, this was before Christmas, flew to Boston to meet this real highly intellectual, specialized oncologist up there, and snow was like waist high. Snow,
probably the coldest I've ever been in my life.
We don't see that kind of snow in Georgia, right? No. And we get there and go in, wait. They did a bunch of lab work while I was there. They had seen the tumor. We meet with this oncologist and he's like, I don't even think it's an angiosarcoma, but I would still, my recommendation is to go in and just remove the whole half side of your face. And we would have a plastic surgeon reconstruct it. And he told Dave, you tell him what he asked you.
It's gonna get a little foggy in here.
That's all right.
He asked me if I had a video camera, and I was kind of taken aback at that. I was like, "What do you mean?" And I told him no. He said, "Get a video camera." Basically, so Harley would be able to have pictures and videos of her. He was basically telling me, even if we do all this, we don't expect her to survive. Basically, she may have 4 to 6 weeks. So that was hard to hear. And I'll be honest with you, I got mad. I got mad at him,
Yeah.
We so mad that we called my oncologist back in Georgia and she said, fly home.
Yeah.
Don't fly home right now. Go to the airport, get on a plane and fly home. And we did. We were there for probably less than 12 hours and we flew home. And just, we weren't expecting that. And little did we know that was still not even the worst of it, but it was still horrible. So we flew home. So much happened in that month. We'd have about a 5-hour podcast. So for sake of time, I'll skip. But we tried to harvest embryos because they told me I would never have any more children. I needed to start chemo and everything we did failed. Like everything we did failed. Nothing worked. We spent a lot of money on, failed fertility treatments. Yeah. And towards the end of December, Harley started getting sick. And still, we still don't know what type of cancer I have. Still unknown.
Yeah.
Still, they're sending slides out to, everything out to all these pathologists. At one point, somebody was brought in from outside the country and looked at this.
Yeah.
But anyway, towards the end of December, Harley got sick. He had to be admitted to Scottish Rite in Atlanta, and he had RSV. Now, anybody that's got children or has been around young children knows RSV is bad for babies, but it is especially bad for a preemie with underdeveloped lungs. Still, I mean, I don't even know. He might have been 5 or 6 pounds. He had a hard time gaining weight for a little while, so he was still tiny. So they put him in Scottish Rite. We were there for probably close to 2 weeks, and he almost had to go on a ventilator. He was very, very sick, very, very sick. But I remember being at the hospital, and I was there by myself for one morning, and which wasn't usual. Usually David was there, my mom, but David was still, I mean, in the midst of all this, David is still trying to hold down a job.
Yeah.
So I'm at the fire department now, so I'm, trying to show up for my shift but as much as I can without burning through leave and stuff. So I'd be gone for 24 hours, during all this also.
But I remember being in his room at Scottish Rite, and the pulmonologist came in to talk to me. And when he came in, I remember seeing 2 of him. Like literally 2 side by side. And I guess my eyes made him wonder what I was doing. And all the doctors and nurses there knew what was going on with me. So they were all very compassionate and caring and, nice. And he saw me, kind of looked confused. And I said, I'm sorry, I see 2 of you. And he said, you're having double vision? I said, yes. And I've got a raging headache. It is so bad. And he said, you need to have that checked out. He said, ASAP, you need to have that checked out. And so to make a very long story short, we found a doctor, a neuro-ophthalmologist. So he's a neurologist, but specialized in how neurology and ophthalmology come together, the nerves in the brain, the optic nerves. And
all that.
So he was right across the street. And we called to get an appointment, and it was a Friday. He was like, I can't, the scheduler was like, I'm sorry, we can't see you same day.
Yeah.
And my dad, we ended up getting my dad to call, and he called the office, like squalling his eyes out, telling them my story. And they said, okay. He said, she's right across the street. Please just let her come over. They agreed. We go over there, saw the doctor. I think he knew before he even sent me. But he said, you need to have an MRI, and I'm going to order it stat, and you're going to drive a few exits up to Dunwoody, and there's an imaging place there, and they're going to do an MRI, and I'm going to wait right here until you come back, and we'll read it together. Now, the man had a huge golf charity that afternoon, canceled the whole thing, waited on me. My dad took me up for the MRI. We went back, and when I got in there, he pulled the MRI of my brain up on his screen, and right in the middle of that MRI, right in the middle of my brain, it looked like there was a golf ball just sitting right in the middle of it. And he said, do you see that? He said, and he pointed out, I mean, I'm not a doctor, so I never knew this, but he pointed out, he said, do you see how everything in your brain is symmetrical? This side mirrors this side, and it does. If you look at a scan of a normal anatomy of a brain, everything's symmetrical. And he said, do you see how you have a golf ball on one side but not on the other? And I said, yes. He said, that's a tumor. And I remember asking him if he could do surgery. I said, I had tumor here, and they operated. And he said, no. He said, I can't. And I'll never forget his words. My dad was sitting there. He said, that tumor is in a place only God's hands can go. And he said, it's called the cavernous sinus. And he said it's a wall of veins and nerves and it houses all that. He said human hands can't go there. He said only God's hands.
Wow.
But in that nerve ended up is pressing against her optic nerve. So shortly after that,
before the end of the day,
what started out as double vision got to where she couldn't even move her eyeball, left, right, up or down. And then her eyelid just closed and she just lost all control of that, she couldn't open her eye, unless she just pried it open because that tumor was pressing against that nerve. Mm-hmm. So during all that, she ended up being admitted into the hospital, Cobb Hospital, which was, 30 minutes or more from Scottish Rite, to undergo, they started pretty significant radiation treatments.
Well, you're skipping.
I'm skipping stuff. But anyhow, during this time, she's over here in this hospital. I got Harley in the children's hospital over here. It was a whirlwind of trying to split my time at both, trying to check on Harley, check on her, still trying to go to work when I can. It was just a whirlwind. For like I say, we're standing in the midst of that hurricane.
Yeah. So what did you guys do in response then? If well, we can kind of get in more of the spiritual here in a minute, but like in response of like, you have all this stuff going on, and then they say we can't do anything. Like only God can go there. Like then what was your response then? Was it? I mean, if it's like the doctors can't do anything, was it like they just gave you medicine to try to maybe help with it? Did they say this might be how long you have, or like what was the response if we can't do nothing physically, like of the surgery? Like what was the response then to that tumor then?
So, well, when that night after I saw that doctor, I ended up being admitted into the hospital, mm-hmm. and my oncologist came on board and said, "We're going to do a full body CT scan. If it's in her brain, where else is it?"
Right.
So that once I got admitted into the hospital, they did a full scan and saw that I had tumors on both lungs, mm-hmm. and there were spots on my liver. So she said, "All right, we are starting chemo and radiation." And it was just a generic head and neck chemotherapy. It's not targeted specifically. If you have breast cancer, there is, and they call it the red devil, but it's a chemo that's targeted for breast cancer. Yeah. But they couldn't target. They don't know what I have.
Yeah, what type she had.
So she consulted with the man that we did not care for in Boston. Yeah. She called him back and said, "Hey, look, it's spreading. What are your thoughts?" Yeah. And she consulted with some other doctors, and they came up with a game plan. They started me on 2 types of chemotherapy, and I had radiation to my brain and then to this facial area where the cancer was in my neck.
Yeah.
And so I started that in the hospital, and that was brutal. They gave me so much pain medicine, more pain medicine than you can even imagine. I was wearing fentanyl patches on my back.
Yeah,
I was trying to keep her comfortable.
I mean, just the most amounts of pain medicine. And so, looking back, I've asked my doctor, I'm like, what when that was going on, what were your thoughts? And she said, you were dying.
Yeah,
quickly.
And they had never, like I said, besides the guy in Boston, nobody here, as far as her oncologist, ever really gave us a sense of what they thought as far as long term, whether or not she had a year to live or 4
a nurse.
Weeks.
There was a nurse in the hospital one night when I was by myself, and she came in, and I think she saw how. At this point, some months had passed, and Harley had come home from the hospital. They would bring him to see me. Yeah. They could see. And I remember her coming in one night, and she said, you don't have to do this. She said, you could stop.
Yeah.
She said, you could stop and go home. You've probably got about 4 weeks. And so she's reading my chart. She knows what the doctors are writing. And so she, people have been like, oh, I can't believe someone would say that. But no, on the flip side, maybe she didn't know I knew, and you don't.
And her oncologist, I think after everything was all said and done, she was in remission. We asked her during that time, what did you really think? And she told us that she thought at the most 4 weeks, but she just didn't want to tell us that. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? But yeah, during with all that going on, you switch over, talk about the spiritual aspect of it. I guess probably shame on us for not being in the place where we should have been when all this started, as far as our relationship with the Lord. But you get your prayer life squared away pretty quickly. When this happens, and it's I hate to even say that. I don't want to come off as saying, we're using the Lord as a spare tire, but
we kind of were back then.
During that time, we kind of did. Obviously, post all that, it's definitely changed our relationship and walk with the Lord. But during that time, I mean, we were kind of cruising along in life. We had no needs, we had no problems.
Yeah.
I think we were probably like the majority of the average. We were just the average Christian.
But everything we needed, we could supply. Right, we had never gotten to a point in life where we needed something we couldn't supply.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so
suddenly there's this huge need that
we can't
fix it. We're both helpless to do anything about. So,
but you talk about what do you do? This is a time where I was so sick, mad at God, upset, it's all the emotions.
Yeah.
People are like, oh, I bet you just prayed and prayed and prayed. I did pray, don't get me wrong, but
throughout the course of one day, we would have, I at least would have all those emotions. I'd go from asking why to being mad at the Lord to bawling my eyes out with the Lord, pleading with him. So,
But you hear people talk about praying a wall of prayer around you. And it's times like these where you're thankful you have a good church family. Absolutely. Because the times there were so many times probably we couldn't pray and we were angry or upset, but we had a wall of prayer around us. And I'm thankful for that, because without that, I don't know where I would be, because the story kept getting worse. Because after they found all the cancer, I started the chemo, I started the radiation. About a month went by and they repeated all of my scans and it was worse.
Yeah.
Like the tumors in my lungs just went from having tumors in my lungs. And I have the paper in my room. It says there are innumerable tumors present on both lungs. And I remember asking the doctor, what does that mean? And she said, it literally means they can't count them. There's so many.
Wow.
So it's almost like the chemo that she was on was just like kind of feeding it.
Yeah, like a fertilizer.
It was just growing. So everything was going in the wrong direction,
So we'll change it over to the spiritual point here, because this is where it changes.
During this time, whenever that bad report came, it was the same time frame whenever the church put out the paperwork for everyone to sign up. We set a whole, whatever month that was, the whole month people could put their name down to fast for that day. So there were some days where they might have only been one person fasting, but
I've got the calendar. There are like 5 people on every single day.
Every day there's multiple people literally praying and fasting for her during that month. This was after we received that bad report of the cancer growing. And it was like flipping a switch. That's when.
Well, along with that, so that month, Brother Eddie put that list out. People fasted and prayed for a whole month. My oncologist changed the chemo. She changed one of the chemos. And Brother Eddie would say, y'all pray for wisdom for the doctors. Tell the doctors what to do. They don't know what to do. Y'all help pray for wisdom. And so my doctor, it was funny that she decided, let's try this chemo.
Let's try something different.
I wonder who told her. And so the fasting and praying, we changed the chemo. And then the next month they repeated the scans and there was a little bit of difference. And I remember one morning waking up and my eye barely cracked. I could barely crack my eye open. And I asked my oncologist and she was like, your eye, you will never regain control of your eye.
Yeah,
never.
That's what she prepared her for. Like already talking about if she comes out the other end of this, that once you lose function of that muscle, it doesn't come back. So they were talking already about like putting a little spring in there to kind of open it up.
A glass eye,
even taking her eye out. She was convinced that, once you lost that function, that it
she had a patient.
Yeah, there was no coming back from it.
Who had a tumor in their brain that affected that nerve, same thing. And she said that he never regained any muscle control in the eye. She said, you're not going to regain it. But I remember one day my eye cracked open and I showed her and she was like, she wasn't sold on it.
Yeah, she was skeptical.
But so that throughout May, June, I kept doing the chemo. In July 28th, I'd had another scan about a week before. On July 28th, we went in to see her to get the results of my scan. It was a day for chemo, the whole 9 yards. So we go in and she, you're always nervous on a scan reveal day. Like, what's it going to say? Because at some point I just knew at some point if it kept getting worse, they were out of options. There would be nothing to do.
Yeah.
So she comes in And she's like a Barbie doll. She wore stiletto heels, and she looks just like Barbie. She come in, you could hear her coming a mile away, clicking down the hall.
She couldn't sneak up on anyone.
And I remember coming and getting anxious, like, here she comes. I hear her, and she sat down, and she was like, "Can I just read y'all the report?" And I was like, "Oh boy,
kind of, yeah.
What does that mean?" Like, yeah, just read the report. So she sits down and she pulls it up, and she said, "The radiologist reports there's no evidence of disease present." And I sat there, and this is dumb. I'm gonna tell you, this is so dumb. I looked at her
just in shock,
I said, "What does that mean?" She was kind of laughing and crying, and she said, "Actually, it means it's gone." And we all cried for I don't even know how long. Once we composed ourselves, she said, "I promise you, I never thought we would have said that to you." She said, "I never thought we would see a day where those reports would come in."
And so now, back it up, it's no doubt the Lord, because that was right after the month of multiple people fasting and praying every day that it changed that drastically,
Man.
It went from just a slight improvement to, it went from innumerable tumors present to no evidence.
In a matter of 4 months. Man. If that, maybe 3 months.
Yeah.
And people say, "Oh, we've done so many of these podcasts and interviews," and people, I get some serious feedback people about, she's lying, or she doesn't believe in modern medicine. Yeah. So here's what I have to say about that. I just want to throw that in there. God healed me for 100%. God healed me. Yeah. Did He use my oncologist and modern medicine to help? Absolutely. Yeah. I believe that. I believe He gave my oncologist the wisdom to know what she needed to do.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it was God. Yeah. Ultimately.
He orchestrated it all. Man. No doubt.
I mean, it literally is the place. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, her eye just continued to improve. I mean, you see.
It's still a lazy eye. It's still lazy. It doesn't open all the way, but I regained control of my eye.
Yeah.
Well, you can't even notice, though. That's the good thing.
Right. You can't.
Man.
Well, I have to share this while we're talking about that, just so the listeners review. This is me with the eye closed, sick, dying, and little Harley.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
Man, to me, that's so encouraging, because it's literally, we can't count how much tumor is in there, because there's so much. You only have 4 weeks to live. There's only a place that God can go. And you're facing spiritual, like in the sense that, like, you're mad with God, all these emotions going on. Yeah. Your son, you're trying to keep a job up, all these things, overwhelmed, and then you go from that to let's get like God involved. You're praying and fasting, and then it's like a whole, like, overnight, God just like, there ain't nothing there. I mean, it's just amazing.
So I have to tell you why this happened. Okay. This is exactly why this happened. This is a verse in John 11:4. This is talking about when Lazarus is sick, and I'm going to read it just so I don't mess it up. But it says, when Jesus heard that, referring to Lazarus being sick, his sisters come and say he's sick. He said, "This sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God might get glorified thereby." And that's what this was.
And I remember your dad, Micaiah, saying that he was doing his Bible reading one day, and he read that verse, and he said that the Lord gave him just complete peace about the whole thing with her.
I remember him saying that too.
And he said from then on, instead of him praying for, the cancer to be gone like we all were, that he started praying that the Lord would restore her beauty.
Well, I think that's Brother Warren.
Was that Brother Warren?
I was brother.
One of them.
You were right about Brother.
That was Brother Freddie. Brother Warren, I guess he had the same complete peace about it. Mm-hmm. And he started praying that the Lord would restore her beauty, talking about her eye. And man, the Lord heard all of our prayers,
Well, and also, I mean, Harley came out the other side of it. I mean, he's still a little weird. Don't get me wrong. Like,
now listen,
but I mean, he came
out. He might be your brother-in-law.
It's great. I mean, because he's preaching, he's singing, he's playing the piano. I mean, he's doing a bunch of stuff that you probably never. I mean, he's on the other side of that. Then you guys, and I'm sure it changed. I mean, how would you say? And I don't want to keep you guys too much longer, but how would you guys say that it changed your spiritual perspective and how it changed your life in relationship to God after that point, like from overcoming all these things?
Oh man,
completely.
We're not here. This is a funny story. I wish I would have pulled that verse up so I can remember. So much so that, you know, before all this, like we just did what we wanted. There was no like prayer, like, should we do this, God? Is this your will?
There's no concern about
There's
anything.
Just no concern.
You know,
now, you know, we pray about everything, and I have, you know, I'll say, Lord, I need confirmation. Like I need to see it in a light. I need to see a street sign. I need confirmation. And so this is hilarious. We were going to buy a bed. You remember this? You remember this story? Yeah. We needed a new mattress, but it was shortly after all this. So we were still, so many medical bills and debt, but we needed a new mattress desperately. So we were going to go buy one. And we went and looked that day. They were so expensive. And we were just like, we really can't afford this. We'd have to finance it. We didn't want to do that. And I remember coming home and reading, and in the verses, I think it's in Proverbs. Oh, I really wish I would have looked it up. But the verse says something to this effect. And it's not 100%. I'm not going to get it right. But it's, if thou hast nothing to pay or owest no man, why should he take away thy bed from under thee? And I was like, David, we cannot buy that bed because we would owe on it.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, that was the Lord telling me, because we would have to pay for the bed by financing it. And the Bible's talking about owing no man anything. And we didn't go buy the bed. We didn't. And so we waited maybe another year, and we were able to get a mattress. It's just, and people laugh about that, but that's how much it changed our life, that we pray about everything.
Yeah, little things, you know, going through that, I think has taught us to, you know, you talked about trust at the beginning of this, that we can, if we can trust God with salvation, with, you know, taking away cancer, that we can literally trust him for everything. But I know we've been talking to you for a while, Mike, but I want to add this in, and she may have been wanting to talk about it, but after it was all said and done, you know, we wanted more kids. So we were seeing the fertility specialists, all these people, about what we could do.
Well, let me just add, just not to go into detail, but I had, when a woman goes through that much chemo, they will go through early menopause. So there's no more chance of a child. So that happened to me. Yeah.
So, and they were doing ultrasounds and stuff, checking stuff. And they basically told her, look, if I just saw this and didn't see you, I would think that this was an ultrasound of a woman in her 60s post menopause. She basically said there's no chance for you guys to ever have a baby again. Again, I think this is the Lord just, you know, getting us to fully trust him with all aspect of our lives. I want to say that was a Monday or Tuesday.
That was a Monday.
It was a Monday. So this was a Monday. We hear no chance for you guys to ever get pregnant. And the same week on a Thursday, I think it was. So Harley, when he was little, he literally put his mouth on everything. You know, you could go into the floor of the bathroom, and he's going to want to try to put his mouth on everything. Like kids do. Anyhow, he got a little wart that was on his lip. We took him to the doctor, and they were like, you really need to go back to Scottish Rite and see this basically a plastic surgeon to take it off because of where it's at. You know, you don't want to have this weird place on your lip. So we did that. So they had to do, it was a quick little procedure, but they, you know, knock him out. So he was back. We were back in the little room. This was after it was done.
And I was about to have a procedure. So I had lab work done from my surgeon's office. Just, you know, regular lab work to make sure you're in pretty decent health.
So Harley's coming back around from being, you know, anesthesia. He's crying. He's groggy. He's not happy. And at the same time, while he's in this bed crying, Ashley gets the phone call from that doctor's office.
The nurse who knows my story, knows everything. Everybody, all my doctors knew all my story. She calls and she says, hey, your lab work came back. Ashley, are you pregnant?
Yeah, is there any chance you could be pregnant? Now, again, this is 3 days after they literally did an ultrasound and said there's no chance you could be pregnant.
So I said, no, absolutely not. I went and told her about the whole Monday experience. I said, we just saw a fertility doctor on Monday. I had lab work done. I had an ultrasound done. There was nothing.
Yeah.
She said, we need to repeat the lab work then, just because she said, I believe you. And there's probably been a mix up at the lab, but I can't take you into surgery showing you're pregnant. So we repeated the lab work. So on Friday, she called me and she said, listen, it shows you're pregnant. You need to go back to the fertility doctor. So we went that next Monday. So it had been 1 week. The doctor's like, well, she said, I don't believe it. She said, let's do an ultrasound. And I remember laying there on that table and she did that ultrasound and there was a baby. She looked at us. I don't know if David remembers. She said, this is impossible. That was her words, verbatim. She said, this is, and instantly in my mind, I thought, with men, this is impossible, but with God, things are possible.
Yeah, I say all that. I think that was just like God just wanted us to hear no one more time, so that there was just no doubt,
that it was him.
That it was him. Yeah.
And then a few years went by, and then unexpectedly, again, I was going in for just a routine scan, and they make me take a pregnancy test before I had anything done, because it's just too much to get into medically. Anyway, I was about to have an MRI and they made me take a pregnancy test, and the lady come in there. She's like, you can't go in this MRI machine. You're pregnant.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, I'm not. She said, you are. And sure enough.
Yeah.
So,
but with Grace, she's our middle one. That was one whenever Harley was having that procedure. Harley had been praying. He had wanted a sibling.
Oh, he prayed for a sister.
But he specifically prayed for a baby sister. Like every day, everywhere we went to, he's telling everybody he's praying for a baby sister. We're trying to tell him, hey, buddy, maybe we'll get you a dog or something, because it's probably not going to happen. But sure enough, man, his specific prayer for a baby sister, that's exactly what he got.
It's awesome for him to look back and see that in his life.
Yeah.
Even 4 years old, God heard his little prayer and answered it. He probably wishes he had the dog.
Maybe so.
I love that. I mean, that's exceedingly abundantly above all that you can ask or think, because not only did he say that there's no chance, which you kind of heard that throughout the whole story, but God's like, what did you say? Let me hear that again. And then just did something the whole way. But it was like, there's no chance you could have a kid. And not only am I going to give you one kid, I'm going to double it, because they said you couldn't have any. I'm just going to go above and beyond, where now kids are walking around the house and you're like, you're not supposed to be here. You're not supposed to be here. And then you look in the mirror, I'm not supposed to be here. But God went to a place where only God could go, because man couldn't go there. Man, that's awesome. I love it.
Yeah.
Man, that's fantastic. And you're going around too, speaking, you've spoke at conferences and you've did that and sharing your story. I mean, literally all for glorifying God and from what I can tell, you guys have never gotten over it. Like, I mean, just overwhelmingly thankful, and it's affected the rest of your life. And you can even see it through your kids too. Like, Harley is fired up for the Lord. Every time I'm around him, he's just so excited about it. And it's just awesome that y'all's whole just testimony is so encouraging, and being around you, because y'all are just like, if God can do that, what else can he do? Like, let's
exactly.
Right.
And it's a blessing.
It really is. I love every year. I think, well, maybe this will be the year I don't get calls to come speak, or this will be the year. And I mean, every year the calls just start coming. I mean, I think I've got 3 calls right now. I'm speaking this month and in May. And then, I wrote this book.
I was going to ask you about that.
7 years ago, we wrote this book, and I can't really divulge much.
Yeah.
But there's something special coming. And that's all I can really say. other than I don't want to divulge. But we've already signed contracts on some things. So good things. So the Lord still, we think this is going to die out, and the Lord's like, nope, I'm not done with it yet.
Yeah.
So anyway, just, we can't get over it, but I don't think God can get over it.
Man, that is awesome. And there's nobody that could ever go to you and say, Ashley, that guy, God's not really real. And God, I mean, there's no God. There's no way anybody could ever convince you guys, like, hey, he's not really worth serving. You don't really want to talk to that guy.
There's no way.
Yeah. And I think the same would go for you and everybody that was even involved and praying for us,
Yeah.
were, around at that time during all this, because they saw firsthand,
Right.
the state that she was in. And then, God just working, in her, through her, and healing her of all this.
Well,
So,
I can remember you were a little fella, and we didn't get to come to church much because I was either in the hospital
mm-hmm.
or so immune compromised.
Yeah.
But there was one, it might have been when Harley was dedicated. Anyway, I remember coming to church, and you and there was a couple other boys your age would like to hold those doors open going into the sanctuary, like back behind the choir loft.
Yeah.
Because I won't forget, you were standing right there holding that door open. And we came walking up the hall, and when I turned the corner, I saw you, and you looked at me, and your eyes got real big, and you said, "I prayed for you." I remember it. You said that. You said, "I prayed for you,"
Yeah.
and I said, "Thank you so much. I appreciate that." And so you may not remember that, but I remember that, and I know that your family was praying, and it still means the world to me.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And everybody that was around that environment is without excuse of what God has done, that testimony. If you were to walk away from church and say, I don't know that God's real, I don't know if he's not really worth, so people are without excuse with that. And I remember bits and pieces because I was younger. But I do remember praying with my mom. I think the day that maybe she scheduled fasting and stuff like that. And then just be sitting there, and then Brother Reddy announce, "Hey, you won't believe what happened." And then your dad getting up and just like praising God and shouting and just all that. I remember all of that very, like, just even from that age, remembering that. And then it just went on. We never stopped talking about it. It was just, hey, you remember what God did? And we were never meant to stop talking about it. We think that God has to do something new every single day, but like God continually, even to the children of Israel, brought up, I brought you out of Egypt. And there's nothing wrong at all with bringing up something that God did at one time. Like God is so good, we have to keep talking about it. And that's just one story. I mean, there's stories all around, but man, we could get on and talk about it like you're still talking about it and sharing your story. But I mean, how could you ever get over that? I mean, it's just,
you can't.
It's a blessing just to not only be saved, because I mean, you're going to heaven for all of eternity, but then to God answer the prayer like that and then just be there, because he's not a God that just creates things and then steps away. He's like, I want to be involved in what's going on down there. And man, that just gets me fired up. And I'm not gonna keep it. But is there any lasting, like, just last words that you would want to say to our listeners? Maybe there's somebody going through something that we don't know about or anything like that. Is there any like encouraging words that you would want to leave our audience with and share?
Well, so what I always tell people is don't give up, obviously, because even when doctors and nurses were giving up on me, our church still prayed. We still had God. Don't give up. And pray big. Pray big. I always sign that when I sign my books. I put pray big. There's nothing too big for God, right? They said we can't have a baby, but we prayed for a baby. Pray big. Pray outside the box. And I always tell people, if you don't have a church family, that I don't even know how we would have survived without, I tell people, get a church, get involved, find a church, get in, get involved, because you need God, number one, but you need church. You need church. So do you have anything to add to that or say?
I mean, just going on with that, with the praying aspect, not only praying big, but just praying specifically.
Right.
Don't think that you can't pray specifically for things. And then and just know that you can literally trust God with every aspect of your life.
Yes, sir.
That's probably the biggest takeaway that I have from all of it, was that I'm probably not much of a worrier anyhow, but man, when things happen, I've learned, and not to sound boastful or anything, but I've learned from this that I just give it to God, that there's no sense in me worrying about things, stressing about things that are beyond my control, because there are so many things in life that are beyond your control.
Right.
And I know, as guys, there's a problem. We want to be able to fix it. And it's awesome when we can fix it, but there's so many things that we can't fix, that we can't touch. So big things, little things, I've learned to just give it to the Lord, and he's going to handle it. His will is going to be done, and you just pray according to his will. Probably the biggest life lesson I have from all this.
I love that. You can only I heard the only two things you control is your attitude and your actions. You're
That's
giving it
it.
to God because you can't control the results, and
You
God
can't.
can go to a place where nobody else can go. That just
Yep.
stuck with me, and I probably won't ever forget it. It's like that's the place only God can go. His hands can go.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
that's the situations that we're trying to fight to make everything work. But really, there's a lot of situations today, maybe even people listening, that's only a place God can go, and His hands are going to go in it. Just leave it to Him and trust in Him. God gets so excited about people with faith, saying, "We're going to give it all to you." So, man, that's exciting. Thank you guys so much for being on here. Man, it got me fired up just for prayer and things that God's doing at this point in our life. And also, if you could, maybe after this is over, can you send me the link to your book? Because I want to put that into the description so anybody can go get it. And you'll have to come on the next time to tell all the details about the book stuff. You have to come on.
Okay.
But
we'll share. We will share.
Okay, sounds good. Well, yeah, send me that link and we'll put it there for any of you guys who want to get that. I would highly recommend it. And thank you guys for tuning in. Share this with somebody because this will be encouraging to them to never give up. Keep praying, trust in God, and because He knows what He's doing. So thank you for tuning in. Share this with somebody, and we'll look forward to seeing you here next time.